friend?
Hello. Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Yeah, slowly working our way through this pandemic, but yeah, all right, thank you.
It's great to have you here. Now, obviously, we've known each other for a couple of years. You've obviously known James P for a couple of months. So today, you've had quite the journey. Can't wait to hear about it. Hopefully, cover all these points in a form of depth. Where do you want to start, Jim? What have you been up to?
Well, where to start? I don't really know.
Why rugby? What got you obviously into S&C and rugby?
Rugby. Well, I think blame my dad and my mum really. Both of them played, so it's been pretty. I'm a twin as well, so there's always been competition between us two, and we both have been fully obsessed with sport since we were tiny. So yeah, I played everything at school: rugby, tennis, did cross country, football, squash, even played some terrible golf. I still play some terrible golf. Yeah, so I've always just been obsessed with sport. But my mom's a PT, so I think that's probably something that sparked my interest in fitness early on. Always watching her going out running with clients, training clients, and that sort of stoked a small fire in the back of me somewhere. And as I've got older and sort of gone along my studies, it's just become more and more prominent, really.
Because I think at this point, as well as obviously having your S&C role, you have not recently, launched your PT business. Is that correct? That's another sort of feather.
Yeah, it's another string to the bow sort of thing. Well, I can't take full credit. One of the players at Bedford Blues, Ollie Curry, it's his business, but I'm his business partner within it, and it's called the Training Company UK. So Ollie is the main man really, and we're still training out at the Bedford Blues gym, doing group sessions, one-on-one PT stuff, and that's been a great thing to have, especially during this pandemic, and you focus away from rugby, which has been really helpful. I've really enjoyed it, and Ollie actually sells equipment, so a little plug for him. If anybody's looking for dumbbells and bands, check out the Training Company UK shop on Instagram. You're welcome, Ollie.
Was that discount code James's rugby coaching learning podcast as well?
Hashtag 20%.
Yeah, perfect.
Is this possibly the first podcast with three Jameses? Because I am actually a James, so just everyone calls me Jim or Jimmy. So
yeah, don't make it easy for ourselves, do we?
No.
Right, so we've got James H, James P, and then we'll stick with Jim. Or
yeah, stick with Jim. I don't really answer to James, I have to admit. It's more often been told off.
Bless. No, you Ginger Jim on my phone. That's how I know it's you, mate. When you contact me constantly, bless, with constant great chat. So yes, mate. Obviously, family background in sport. Obviously, played through school. When did you take that sort of jump into taking S&C sort of seriously?
Probably through my undergrad. That's I my first year I sort of avoided physiology because I was quite scared of it, and I'd come from a background of doing BTECs throughout A level, so I was quite, I think, scared of that academia and not being good enough for it. But as I sort of progressed through my undergrad, I realised actually I'm really interested in physiology and anatomy and how the body works, and obviously being sport mad, how those two sort of coincide together. So that's, yeah, sort of throughout my undergrad, so the fire began to burn a bit more, and I got an opportunity in my third year. I say opportunity, I dislocated my shoulder during my second year playing rugby for the rugby team, and then obviously I learned how to rehab and exposed to that sort of side of things. So that sort of developed that side a bit more, and then I was given the opportunity to run a fitness class with my lecturer, and then sort of doing that, and also sort of started to mould that into the rugby side of things, because I began to coach the rugby team with the first and second team, 15 coaches, and sort of push them towards the fitness side of things. So I started helping run fitness sessions. So yeah, sort of my undergrad, that's sort of where that desire sort of came from.
And I mean, with that undergrad experience, what was it that took you into that masters? Was it were you looking to go into professional sport right from the start? Was that your sort of goal?
No, I mean, I looked into teaching more at first. That was something that I was interested in, but as I sort of went along, I sort of realised more and more that I was becoming more distant from wanting to be in a school environment, and the idea of personal training or training people was way more appealing. Throughout uni, I was always training with different people, and I sort of would always have a little bit of a posse going to the gym together, and sort of always had a group around me that liked to train with me and what I did. So that was definitely something I found more enjoyable than just coaching in a school environment. So that sort of was in my mind, and then I took a 2 years hiatus from education and went away. And during that time, I'm sure we'll get onto. I lived in China for just under a year and did some more coaching out there. And I thought of sort of realised that I really don't want to be just stuck in a school environment. And I wanted to push myself and challenge myself to work with athletes. And yeah, so that's where I applied for a master's and really decided, this is what I want to go into. Let's go for it and see where I can get. And yes, doing all right so far.
I'm sure we'll come on to China, and you talked about you wanted to have a break from the education route and stuff. Did you have any specific intentions or purposes for going to China, like specifically?
Not really. I think I wanted to push. Well, I suppose it was more just pushing myself, really. I wanted to go somewhere completely different, somewhere that I didn't know anybody, and see how I dealt with the situation. I think that was more of just a challenge to myself to see how I'd cope and what I could do out there. And there's so many people I know now that have gone to China since I've been and asked me how I got into it. And it was such a good experience because I think I learned mostly about myself and what I want to do and who I am as a person. And I think everybody sort of has that period in their life where they sort of have that time to themselves where they really want to know what they're all about. And that experience taught me a lot and sort of gave me that mental fortitude. You're on your own in a different country for months on end. Well, I was with a friend, thankfully, but I mean, going into that experience slightly deeper, she didn't really enjoy the experience, and it was quite clear a couple of months into our time there that she wasn't that happy. So for me, I sort of learned to be positive, and try and be positive for both of us, even though she wasn't quite enjoying it as much as she thought she would. So I think that really helped me develop my sort of mental strength throughout that time to be positive and get motivate us both to get through that period of time before coming home and doing what we really wanted to do.
Awesome.
And I mean, did you find it quite easy to sort of adapt to that? Obviously, from an outlooker looking into China, a very different culture. How did you find the culture and how did you adapt to it initially? Was it quite difficult or?
I suppose, yeah, initially it was a shock. The year before that, I'd been traveling and I'd been around sort of Southeast Asia. So I had some experience of how much a white person would stick out like a sore thumb. But the city that I lived in was called Langzhong, and basically it's one of the 4 oldest traditional sort of cities that are left in China. So it's got an old city like town within the wider city, and in there super old traditional. You think of the Snickers adverts where you see people running across the roofs, and I'm talking like it looks just like that. So it's so stereotypical, and it was really cool. You've got tiny little grannies like walking around, sort of like hitting you with their walking stick when they walk past you, and they, you really do stick out, and everybody's staring at you. Everyone's tapping each other. I think my first day, I went to Walmart and there was a queue. I got stopped for a photo, and I turned around. There was a queue of like 10 people wanting photos with me. And I quickly realised, this old traditional city that I was living in, me and my friend were the only white people there. So I suppose it was a bit of a shock at first, but after a couple of weeks, you sort of think, okay, this is where I am now. I just got to embrace it, be prepared to have everybody stare at you and get on with it, sort of thing. But it was really good as well because it stuck out like a sore thumb, but that also brought a lot of benefits. Not many people had white friends, so lots of people really interested in me and my friend while we were there, what we were doing, and they wanted to get to know us. So after I had some really cool experiences where traveled the country and got lots of things for free. So it was really, really quite a cool experience to have.
And
That's awesome. Oh, go on.
No, on you go, James. I've said enough, mate. On you go.
Yeah, that's really cool. He talks about some of the benefits that came with that, and I was wondering, was there anything you look back on and you think, well, actually, maybe I learned something in that experience without realizing it? Talking about sticking out like a sore thumb and perhaps getting attention and looks different to what, so how you'd be over here and stuff. And I wonder if you ever look back and go, well, actually, that might have taught me something that I didn't realize at the time.
Yeah, I'd say probably just believing in yourself and also not really worrying too much what other people think. There's sort of a power in self-belief, isn't there? So I'd be in a city somewhere, don't know anybody, and you're sort of on edge slightly. It's just you and my friend, and you're trying to go. I think we were going to. It wasn't the Great Wall. Can't quite. We were in Jian. I can't think where we were at the time, but we were sort of on our own, and you sort of feel quite isolated. But then you sort of relax a bit and think, okay, just be positive and see what comes from it. And we actually managed to meet somebody in a bar who managed to take us on a trip for free for the day. And if you think that if you can survive in a place where you don't speak the language, where the language is so complex and you're communicating to someone through your phone, if you can get through that and have a good experience, then being stood in front of some rugby players is nothing in comparison. You can get through it. So I suppose that way it's taught me to relax slightly more and enjoy being in an environment where you can openly communicate.
Yeah, 100%.
No, that certainly. I don't know, James, if you've had any experience like that, but certainly going out to America for 2 summers, obviously not as bizarre as the Chinese experience. Obviously Americans ourselves who both speak English, etc. But definitely working and designing a program at a summer camp certainly taught me to work within a different culture and certainly relax. I certainly look back on that experience now and think, out of all the rugby sessions I've done, out of all the coaching sort of development stuff I've done, certainly that American experience has probably prepared me more for this Cambridge role than the rugby experiences, bizarrely. Just the way to work with other people, and that sounds very sort of similar to yourself, Jim.
Yeah, I think you definitely get those. Again, that's almost like those personal skills and characteristics, like your confidence and belief and stuff. I'd love to hopefully in the near future get the opportunity to go out abroad and expand and trial new things and new environments. I think a big, in relation to what you guys have said, a big learning I've had so far was just taking up this first role with a club called West Bridgeford, who are a senior men's side up here, and obviously being 20 years old and younger than pretty much all the players. I doubt they've certainly had a coach probably of my age, so that was a huge learning experience for me, kind of that initial building that initial foundation, those relationships with, again, people who almost look at you and view you a little bit differently, and working to kind of break down those perhaps maybe thoughts that they might have initially had has definitely been a cool learning experience for me, and something that again gives me confidence then going back into the uni environment and stuff like that.
Yeah, I couldn't recommend going abroad anymore. It's one of the best experiences you'll have, and this pandemic I think has taught so many people that when there is the opportunity to go somewhere else, you need to embrace it and see what's out there, because there's so many amazing experiences to be had if you can leave the country and get out of this place.
Yeah, so it's not the easiest task at the moment, but hopefully, touch wood.
I mean, definitely, James. A point you made there about going into an environment where you're quite young and you're coaching sort of an older athlete. Obviously, we're sort of all 20s. Jim, have you experienced that sort of in the Bedford role, which I know we'll speak about in more detail? Have you been surprised at how players have responded to you, being a young coach?
Yeah, I'd say it's sort of on both ends of the spectrum. You've got sort of the guys who have been around the championship for multiple years, have been there and done it, and I feel like those are the guys who are really good with a young coach, because maybe they're used to a certain style of someone old. So for them, it's probably quite nice having a new coach, someone younger, who can really sort of relate more to what they want. Whereas the younger guys, I suppose they don't quite know yet what's good, what's bad, and they've got their own sort of perceived ideas without the experiences yet. So I think it's probably easier coming from the older boys who have been there and done it, and they can sort of steer you as well, which is quite nice being a younger coach, having those sort of senior players where you can have honest chats. And like the skipper Sean McCarthy at Bedford, he's great. I talk to him quite often about what's going on, and he's really good at sort of steering me the right way. And he's been there and done it. So it's really useful having those relationships with those players, and especially as a young coach, you slowly begin to realise who you can go to and who you can communicate with to help you.
Definitely. Okay, James, and what about, obviously, hearing about Jim's experience being quite a young coach? What's your sort of experience, going into, obviously, you've been in university environments, club environments, about to go into a new university environment. What's been your experience as sort of a coach in that?
Yeah, it's been really interesting for me. It's definitely shaped my learning a lot. I suppose I don't have, I'm still kind of wherever I've got into environment, I've still been a young coach and stuff. So I suppose I haven't really experienced myself how it feels to just kind of walk in as what you'd, not being a normal coach, but an older coach kind of thing. Certainly becomes easier the more I do it. So you talk about, kind of when I first started coaching at school, I kind of felt the nerve a little bit more, and I was doing a lot with my school first team, bearing in mind that the lads were all kind of a year above me, or a few in my year, and my mates and stuff. That was in terms of relationships and stuff. I learned a lot about how to manage them. Moving into, like, when I came to uni again, that was probably the most nerve-wracking experience. But I learned again that kind of I couldn't quite tell initially if it was a mixture of the environment I was fortunate to be going into, or just kind of my personality and stuff. But it wasn't very long before anyone with kind of giving you a slightly funny look had kind of just accepted and actually were quite excited about me being a coach. And then I think that led into when I came into West Bridgeford, which was obviously the adult side. I almost didn't really think anything of the fact that I was coming in too much as a young coach. I'd experienced coaching older people who might be a bit taken back, and I'd learned, even though everyone's different, kind of some ways of, really, to be honest with you, just how me being myself tended to mitigate any uncertainties and stuff, and help form those good relationships. And so again, I suppose that now that standard me in good stead for, you mentioned, obviously, going to a new university. It's not entirely confirmed, but most likely, I'm going to be moving down to Loughborough for my postgrad. And I suppose I won't be as young a coach in relation to the players there, but also I've been a bit more proactive in setting things up correctly prior to beginning there, which is again just part of from what I've learned through the experience as a young coach, and kind of learning about, just to be honest with you, just being myself and not fearing anything too much. And the sooner I'm comfortable, the players are likely to be comfortable as well, really.
Excellent, mate. Excellent. No, I mean, this. I'm so excited for this Loughborough experience for you. I think you'll have a great time, and sounds like a good progression point at the right time for you as well.
Thank you. Hopefully, I was saying, hey, the thing that struck me was, like, I've got kind of coach friends / mentors who kind of work, who are Australian and work down there, and as soon as they hear the word Loughborough, they were singing praises and stuff about the opportunity. So there's that which Loughborough carries with it in its nature, but then getting to know people like Rhys Edwards, the director of rugby, and learning about the programme and stuff is really kind of, it's become incredibly obvious to me that they want to situate me somewhere in the programme that's going to maximise my development. And when they've got a programme which has kind of been as supported and as rich as theirs, I think it's going to just be an incredibly exciting opportunity. And likewise, the postgrad course itself is going to be the perfect blend, hopefully, for a really good year of development for me, which is, as you say, very, very exciting.
Excellent. Well, I guess this leads us quite nicely onto the next point about academia. Obviously, Jim, back to you. You went on to study a master's at the University of Bedford. Was that was after you came back from China? Was that directly after, or did you take a little bit of a break when you got back?
So I got back in the summer. So yeah, just earned some money in the summer, and then when the terms sort of start for masters, which is sort of October time, sort of flew straight into that, and did my masters in strength and conditioning at the University of Bedfordshire, which was under Ian Fletcher, who's sort of one of the head board members of the UKSCA. So if you don't know what the UKSCA is what it says on the tins, the United Kingdom Strength and Conditioning Association. So it's sort of the big bad boss of S&C. And so once you've dived into that sort of program, whether it's masters, undergrads, they're sort of the driving force behind most programs, and the masters should technically set you up to proceed on to doing your UKSCA accreditation, which lots of coaches have, which sort of is a gold standard of strength and conditioning, and sort of shows that you're well qualified. So he was a pretty good person to be leading my masters. To be fair, he was really knowledgeable. Really, he was in his 50s, and he could do sort of a clean jerk, snatch, full range, and showed us young pups how to lift properly. It was quite amazing watching him go about his business. So yeah, I had a really good sort of coordinator to take me through my masters.
That's something that struck me just looking at kind of when I was looking at potential masters courses and stuff, is that actually you're working or being taught by and kind of almost working with real kind of like true kind of accredited experts in the industry and stuff. And I just wonder, as well as obviously you get your qualification and you're going to learn a heap as well, just actually the opportunity to have relationships with those people in the industry must have been a pretty cool opportunity.
Yeah, it's part of the reason why I think I've gone on to get jobs, is because I had a good relationship with Ian. He's a man with many fingers and many pies. He's worked for England Rugby, he's worked for New Balance, he's worked with so many professional teams, and he knows loads of people, and he's good at what he does, and his knowledge is far greater than mine. So it was a really good person to have, and they can open doors for you if you get on well with them. So it's when you're going down sort of that next level of academia, it pays to get on with the people who are running the courses and trying to just speak openly about what you want to achieve. From day one, I told Ian what I wanted, and he knew that was my goal, and he was really good at sort of pushing me in directions that he thought would help develop me and get me to where I wanted.
Awesome.
This masters opened quite a number of doors. Am I right that you spent was it the whole year, Jim, you spent with Bedford Blues on a sort of intern?
Yeah, and that sort of came from Ian as well. So Ian sent an email over sort of saying Bedford were looking for assistant S&Cs, more of an internship sort of role. So yeah, I got an assistant role with Bedford for the year under Jamie Bain, who was the head of strength and conditioning at the time. And Jamie is an awesome S&C coach. He's worked for England 20s, Gloucester, Worcester, and he's done two sort of rounds with Bedford. One before he made his jump up to the Premiership, and one sort of as he was coming down and trying to move away from S&C. So I had two brilliant role models to help me sort of on my path, and I was so fortunate in that year that I was with Bedford, because I had some crazy good players there. Lee Dixon, Chris Chekai, Will Hooley. I mean, if yeah, so had some real household names there, and some guys that you could really sort of listen to and just watch and learn. So it's great for me just to see those guys doing their jobs and their roles, and sort of how the SNC can impact and help drive everything forward.
I find that really interesting. This is a conversation I've had with both of you pre this recording and also individually. Is we've all sort of come through either last year, this year, or about to go into a master's course. Just an interesting question for you, well, both of you, and I'll feed in as well. With doing your masters, is the reason you're doing your masters to open these doors, or is it directly to do the learning to then come out the other end and then look at the doors, if that makes sense?
Oh, I think it's both, personally.
Right.
I think if you're going to do a master's in the chosen area that you want to go into, I think that's your ticket to show people that you're serious about it.
Yeah.
And that can then open doors if you reach out to, teams, companies, whatever it is you want to go to. Say, look, I'm pushing myself academically to get more education, be more professional, be better at what I do. Can you give me an opportunity to then apply that theory into practice? So I think it opens both doors both ways. And if you're showing the employers that you're pushing yourself to be better educated, then those doors will hopefully open.
Yeah, I'd echo that, and thinking about it from I think my personal point of view. Whenever I've looked at education, whether that was applying here to where I am now, Nottingham-Trent or Loughborough, for me it was always that balance of what is there potential for me to gain academically, what can I learn, and then also actually just at the institutions themselves, what are the opportunities, okay, largely falling in the rugby program, who am I going to work with, how can I develop, where might I be situated within that. So for me it's always been that blend of what can I learn academically and what that might lead to, and that might prove to, like, as you say, future employers and stuff, but also actually what doors might be available just within the institution for me to do what I want to do. And so that's always been a real motive for me in any decisions. And I suppose getting that balance for me personally has always been the most important thing. So, the Loughborough Masters course is incredibly well kind of spoken of and accredited, but at the same time, for me, it had to absolutely have that rugby program and support and the staff that I felt were going to be good and beneficial for me. And that's exactly the same as how I viewed Nottingham-Trent when I decided to come here as an undergrad student.
That's also sort of how I based my decision on where I wanted to do my masters, because I knew Bedford Blues was down the road. I knew Ian had the connections there. I did my homework to work out a way in, and I was lucky that it came off. But it doesn't get handed out on a plate. You have to ask, you have to work for it, and you have to prove it. James is the same, and his Helen, I think it was, can't think of her surname at the moment, who ran James.
Yeah.
She's got fingers in pies as well, and James obviously went on to go to Harlequins and Harlequins ladies and work with them. So it's there if you want it. You just gotta, I think, if you're gonna go down the masters route, do your homework, look at what's the best option for you, what's going to open the doors, because they won't just present themselves straight away. You need to look and work out what's going to help you towards your career.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I completely agree with that. I think, judging on what you said, James, about getting that balance right, I've always studied whilst coaching. So I've always had that sort of finger in both pies of the theory that I am learning academically will have an impact on my then practical coaching. And I know where I first heard about Bedford was I was working with a guy out in America in my first summer, Dom Lamora, who, if he's listening in, I hope he's still enjoying his time out in Canada. But he knew that I was interested in getting involved in a higher level of rugby, and obviously in the Highlands of Scotland, unfortunately, opportunities are quite short and hard to come by. So I always knew that the move south back down to England was imminent, and it was almost the opportunity to come down to Bedford to do a top-up degree, and then obviously not at the time knowing would lead on to a master's, was an opportunity to come down, sort of do that homework and expand the learning around the theory of coaching, but also to be, as both of you have said, Bedford are just down the road. There's a massive amount of Premiership clubs in the area. You know, you're sort of perfectly centred in the middle of the country, to have access to these different things. But I think you're right, boys. I think, you know, if you are looking to do a master's, definitely do your homework. I did mine through Dom, looked at Bedford, saw that they had strong links with the RFU, looked at a number of their lecturers who had previous experience coaching rugby at high levels. I mean, Helen worked with the Scotland women's squad for a number of years and played and coached at Richmond ladies, who obviously were in the Premiership. So, I mean, in my first couple of weeks, I made it my priority to get in contact with the rugby team at the university and said, you know, I'm here, I'm looking to get coaching experience. Do you need a coach? Lucky for me, I got the opportunity to do that for that year. You know, relationships, boys, that you've mentioned are all important. I luckily introduced myself to the head of school at the time, Andrew Mitchell, who basically went to him and said, you know, the reason why I'm here, I want to get to a high level of coaching. You know, obviously, I want to help the university succeed in rugby, and you know, what can we do together? He then introduced me to Helen, who then, moving into my master's year, she became my academic supervisor, with my assistant supervisor being David Pears, who worked high up in the FA in analysis. So David's been great as well. And I think without the academic learning, I wouldn't have got the opportunity to coach university rugby. I don't think I've got the opportunity to go down to Richmond, and obviously most recently, unfortunately, cut short by the pandemic, as we all have been, got the opportunity at Quins with Gary Street and all the players there. So I think for me, academia is brilliant at opening doors. I think in most recent times, without, as I said at the start, for me, the balance has always been important. Having that practical element, that sort of motivates me. Obviously, for many people, for many different reasons, the pandemic's taken a lot of motivation away. I know in sort of the last 4 months of my thesis, of my master's, it was very hard to motivate just purely on the theory of academia. Obviously, that's not academia's fault. That's just where it lies for me. And I think theory is brilliant at pointing people in the right direction, but I think it's important that that theory has a practical reality to it. And I think sometimes for me in my learnings, and maybe this is because I came into a master's quite late. I came into my master's at the age of, 26, 27. So had a lot of pre-exposure to coaching environments, and a lot of the theory made sense, and a lot of theory was like, wow, this is really interesting. Let's see how it works. But I think a lot of theory sometimes just exists in theory, and maybe doesn't relate to that practical environment. I don't know if one of you boys want to jump in here.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, mate. Academia drives everything that I do, but there's also a limit to it. There's only so much you can read and then use and translate, and it's not everything that you read will help you specifically for your environment, especially in the S&C industry in the Championship, because we often play sort of second fiddle to the coaches and just have to pick up the pieces in whatever slots we're given in a session. So it's different in the Premiership. So the Premiership, their sort of sports science dictates what players are exposed to and rules, sort of how sessions are constructed. But in the champ, it's sometimes hard to develop any like specific qualities for the amount of time we're given. So there's you can only use your theory if it's practical to put it into place. So an example would be, you look at rugby through academia. We know it's an lactic aerobic sport, so that sort of prime energy systems that you use are aerobic system, and then there's sort of various bouts of anaerobic high intensity movements like tackles and sprints and stuff. But if I'm only given a 4-minute window within a session, how practically it's difficult to expose them to something that either can then progress week on week and week to get to improve them. So it's quite hard to work to those specific work to rest ratios to develop those capacities. But it's up to you as a coach to adapt and develop and see what's in front of you. And academia doesn't teach you that. And it's good you need that knowledge, obviously, but there's a limit, and you have to sometimes just use your common sense to be able to work out how to do something in a certain situation. And especially in a championship role, I think it's we've got less time, it's more constrained, less funding, less equipment, less everything. You just got to deal with what's in front of you and do your best with that situation. It's a different world in the Premiership, where you've got all the time in the day to do everything that you need, and you've got all the best kit. So academia is great, it will help you along your journey, but you also have to have that coaching experience, I think, to learn how to change and adapt and see what's in front of you to help improve those people that you're coaching.
I agree. James, what are your thoughts, mate? I hope we've not put you off your masters.
No, not at all. All good. I completely agree, and it kind of aligns with my
knowledge base, though, don't you? So
yeah,
yeah. It aligns with kind of my thoughts already. That kind of I've always viewed what I've learned so far as it gets your mind thinking. Probably in the right direction, which is helpful. But as it is for me, it's always been about kind of reviewing that and aligning that to the real life kind of practicalities and where you are, and actually at times, okay, just because this might be proven to work here, it's almost non-comparable to where you're working. And it's the same as if I was to sit and listen to a talk by any like a pro coach, a elite coach about something, you'd still take from that and take what you want and need and apply it to your own environment, and you'd always bring it back across your mind and evaluate it yourself. And I just approach kind of the academia stuff, I approach in the same vein, really. It's just about that, it gives you the knowledge, it allows you in your mind the ability to kind of go with where you're situated yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think just to round this point up, boys, I think we'll all agree that our masters have played, and in James' case, will play massive parts in obviously our careers, and the knowledge that you get exposed to through the journals you get access to. It is quite incredible what people write, and the different. Obviously, Jim with S&C, you go a lot on facts and figures, etc. Obviously, James, maybe we're more in the coaching, it's more opinionated. Obviously, S&C will have its opinions, etc.
Can I jump on that point, Baz?
On you go, mate. On you go.
But I think that's something that is quite challenging for a strength and conditioning coaches, because some things are quite cutthroat and sort of pinpoint. You've got a specific work to rest ratio to work a specific energy system to help improve a player.
Yeah.
Whereas coaching a ruck or a maul, there's say it's a ruck and you're trying to clear someone out. There's 5 different techniques to clear someone out. So I think it's depending on your role, it's easier to adapt and change. And that's one annoyance with strength and conditioning, is the guys who have done this research are like so stringent and on it with these specific goals and stats, and it can be quite frustrating because you sort of think, oh, that doesn't really translate, or that doesn't in the real world help, but that's just part of it, and you need to do the reading and learning to then realize what works and doesn't work in that coaching environment.
now?
So we've talked quite a bit about master's experiences and coming out as the other end of a master's course. And Jim, obviously, you've done a fairly extensive amount of work, specifically in the Championship Rugby environment. Perhaps you could just talk about perhaps some similarities and differences between your experiences. Obviously, you've worked at 2 Championship clubs, so just perhaps a bit of an insight into and around kind of what you've learned from an S&C coach point of view with your S&C hat on, and kind of your kind of how you functioned with and worked with the rest of the coaching team at those 2 clubs.
Yeah, they're very different, the 2 teams I worked for. So obviously I was an assistant beforehand at Bedford, and now I'm the head of S&C at Bedford. But I have also been with Amptil, who are Bedford's close neighbours. They're only 20 minutes away, and they last season was their first season in the Championship, and I was the head of S&C for that season, where we finished 5th. Had an amazing year with them and did so well. But it's completely 2 different, just completely different environments. Amptil sort of that team that are on the rise, and I was their first strength and conditioning coach. They hadn't really had anybody implement anything in that way before, so it was sort of a fresh start, and I could mould things how I wanted, which was awesome. The players were brilliant. They jumped on whatever I wanted, and it was really nice sort of having that, because you go back into the Bedford environment, and they've had an S&C coach for over a decade, and they're a well-established Championship side, so they're quite used to having a strength and conditioning coach, and lots of them have played some really high-level rugby. And Amptil had some awesome players that also had played super high level, like we had Dave Ward, Suwani Tonga-Weir, Mama Molatika, Daryl Vienendaal, lots of really highly experienced players as well, but 2 different environments where most of the squad at Bedford have been around strength and conditioning before. So it was quite different with Amptil, but it was quite nice in that way that I could speak to the coaches and they'd listen, because they haven't had that influence before. So there's 2 contrasting environments, but both really good fun to be a part of.
Awesome, and I suppose around that as well, kind of the talk about those relationships with the coaches and the differences at the 2 clubs. And I suppose you certainly learned a lot about kind of, I'd assume, adaptability and adapting from one environment to the other. What was kind of the not to pick like a favourite out of the 2 environments or anything like that, but sort of if you were to look at, as an S&C coach 10, 15 years ago, this is what I wanted to excel in. Did you feel within both environments, despite the differences, were you able to do what you were wanting to do? And kind of, I've always wondered, how much license and freedom is there for an S&C coach? You talked about kind of the facts and figures behind everything you're kind of having to do and work towards. And so obviously that kind of influences you in terms of you maybe have some set targets and stuff. But I was just wondering kind of what freedom are you allowed as the head of S&C?
It's a hard one, because the Championship's a different beast altogether. You've got blokes who are working in the city, labourers all day, and then they come and train. Especially with Amptil last year, there was a real big juggling act to try and look after those players and have them go to work every day and then turn up to training, trying to feel fresh and still progress in the gym. So in that environment, it was difficult to control everything. But for me, I just tried to bring as much professionalism to the training sessions as I could, looking after the players, like monitoring them, communicating with them all the time, supplements, just any sort of 1%ers that I could do, I was doing. I'm just sort of hoping that would translate. Whereas Bedford, they've got all these protocols already in place. It's, Mike's been the DOR there. Mike Rare's been the DOR there for 15 plus years. He's worked with loads of S&C coaches. He knows what he's doing. He's well versed in work to rest ratios, and so whether it's a small sided game, he'll, I can just speak to him and say, oh, we need to add a bit more an element of higher intensity into this, and he'll change and adapt the game to make it harder, and sort of or play with rest and work times, and it's different environments have their benefits because they've both had to deal with different ones, different sort of coaches. So Bedford's great for the fact that those guys sort of know what they're doing, and I don't have to change too much or say too much for them to be going in the right direction. Whereas Amptul, that small sort of block that I got with them, I had to get everything out of them that I could, and sometimes that was probably quite monotonous for the players. But if you've only got a short period of time, you've got to do what you've got to do to try and help improve them. Hopefully that answers that slightly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously, James, you spoke about you starting up a new role, which obviously seems almost weird in these current kind of times that we're in at the moment. I was wondering then, Jim, what's your role look like in the current climate that we're in? Obviously, I can imagine. Obviously, like I know coaches have tried to do a few things from home where possible. And what about kind of an S&C point of view? Have you had like much contact with the players, and what's it look like? Has it been able to still be kind of fun and enjoyable?
Yeah, no, it has been, and it's really nice coming back to Bedford and seeing lots of familiar faces and players. So in that sense, it was really nice. But we've sort of been in since August. We've been training for a long time, just under furlough and under guidelines and restrictions. So it's been challenging for the coaches to try and mix it up every week and not make it monotonous for the players. And as an S&C point of view, it's been really frustrating because the government and Sport England, whoever's been dealing with the funding and which we're trying to get through, it changes every week. So we've had to adapt so much. And from my point of view, like I was sort of saying or alluding to earlier, that you've got set structures in something conditioning. So I've got a whole year's periodization plan of what specific things I want to achieve in the gym, on the field, to set them up to be the best possible version of themselves by the time the season kicks off. And I've had to rip up my plan over and over and over and change it over and over because the beast changes every week. They're still sort of waiting for funding to come through, and 1 minute we're playing next month and we're playing the next month and we're playing the next month. So it's changed a lot, and it's been difficult to sort of keep the motivation of the players. But I think we've done a good job so far, and it's unprecedented times, and I think the players realise that, and the coaches, we all obviously realise that, and we're trying not to ask too much of the players in this time because we realise they're under furlough, and I think they realise from us as well there's only so much we can give, and especially in these sort of constrained environments with COVID and restrictions and contact time and not being able to do specific drills because we don't want to be too close, like face-to-face contact. So it's been a really challenging experience, but I've learned a heck of a lot, and hopefully this is the last year that I'll ever have like this, and I can just continue on and take all these learnings from what a weird year it's been. But we spent a lot of time with the players and seeing how they react to different things. So for me, it's been really eye-opening to see what players react well, and full credit to the boys that they turn up and they put a shift in every time. So it's been a hard but enjoyable experience so far, and we're just ready to play some rugby. To be honest, I'm ready for a game day. I don't. But I still get the buzz on a weekend when there's a game. It's so good. Even as an S&C coach, I'm not playing, but you look forward to the game day. It's the best day of the week, especially as someone who's a rugby fan like myself. So it's the dream working in that environment. Just been deprived of it for so long.
I think fingers crossed it's hopefully not too far away, and hopefully the worst is behind us. And it's good to hear that whilst there's been multiple frustrations, and you've managed to learn an awful lot, and there's been a lot of adaptability, which I'm sure would have taught you some skills and stuff. And also by the sounds of things as well, the players are pretty content. Because you spoke about the frustrations that you and the coaching team have had, and I was wondering kind of keeping the players motivated and hopefully avoiding them from being too frustrated. That seems to have all gone relatively smoothly, or well as it could have done for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a bumpy ride, but every club's dealt with it in their own way, and I think we've done really well with how it's changed so often. I have to admit, the longer I've spent in the Championship, the more I've realised sort of how we're on our own in this league. It's quite frustrating being a young coach coming into this league, and Championship, in my eyes as a rugby fan, is an awesome league, and there's so much potential there. And you look at the England rugby team currently, that out of that 23-man squad on a game day, I could probably name 10 players at least that have played Championship rugby. It's such a big stepping stone, but I do feel for the players in our league because it's not valued enough, and for some reason they're not getting the support they need. Like they don't have Restart Rugby, they don't have the RPA, they don't get help, and this year's been a real learning curve for those players because lots of them have had to seek out work and go and work for the first times in their lives. Some of them, played professional rugby for all their life or come through academies and never had to experience working. So it's been a really tough year for those lads who haven't had the support of what the higher leagues get. So I'm just really proud of all of them and what they've been putting in so far, because I think it's shown how resilient they are as a group. So yeah, just so excited to get started and watch them play because they deserve to have the opportunity to play.
No, it sounds it, mate. It sounds it. And, I think both of you have mentioned it there. We are all at our hearts rugby fans, and we just want to see rugby back in some form, sooner, hopefully, rather than later. Is there anything else, Jim, that you want to talk about today? I mean, I think we've covered a mass amount. But if there's anything else you'd like to mention or any advice you'd give to young S&C coaches coming through?
Something I think would be cool to hear from you, Jim, would be, think back, okay, you've had an amazing journey so far. If you could maybe pick out, if you're going back to Jim, who's maybe just returned from China or maybe just coming out of the Masters, what would you be telling yourself back then?
I say put the work in. I think someone who's not academically gifted, I had to work my bum off to learn and get back into the swing of academia. It was quite a challenge after spending 2 years sort of traveling the world and living in different countries. So I think if you're going to go down a career path in coaching, just be prepared to put the work in, because if you want to get somewhere, you will get there. You just got to drive yourself and motivate yourself to put the work in to get those qualifications. And then the other thing is confidence, just believing in yourself. You've got this desire to be in this industry, then why can't you make it? If you love it that much, you should be willing to put the work in. So yeah, but self-belief and just sort of hard work and putting yourself through those hours of sat in front of a laptop to then hopefully translate it into the field eventually.
Absolutely. Learning all the time, by the sounds of it.
Even this year, I think this year's been quite nice for me. I've learned loads throughout this pandemic, and I really tried to use that first lockdown to plug some holes that I didn't quite, weren't quite, I've lost the saying, but trying to plug those holes in so I've got more knowledge in the bank sort of thing. So it's, I've tried to use this year wisely and continue learning, because you're never the finished article, and as long as you can remember that, you can still continue to develop and hopefully become a better coach and work your way up the ladder.
Absolutely.
No, I think it's been insightful, Jim. Obviously, we've known each other for a couple of years, but I never leave a conversation not having learnt something new. And I think it's been a great advert today for S&C, for rugby, and obviously the other things that have come along with that for your journey. You're obviously your masters, your travels around China that I'm sure we could have spoken about for hours and hours and hours. And I'm sure that when the time does come where we can grab a coffee again, we no doubt will have that chat. But yes, Jim, I mean, we'd love to have you back in the future, obviously, when rugby does come back, and obviously hear more about your learnings and the travels, obviously through the Championship with Bedford.
Yeah, fingers crossed we go well. But yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I think it's really important that it's spoken about more about how you can develop and sort of work your way up the ladder. So it's been really nice to sort of give some of my opinions, and hopefully it helps any young aspiring S&Cs to pursue their dreams, sort of thing.
Absolutely, Jim. Thank you very much, mate. It's been incredibly insightful, like James just said, and certainly lots of takeaways, even from a non-S&C point of view as well. So many kind of life lessons and things to keep in mind moving forward. And like I say, fingers crossed, Bedford go well. Probably personally should probably root for Nottingham a touch more, but I hope that just behind them, Bedford might be right up there, and I hope that you all thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you, man. So
that probably rounds us up then, James, doesn't it, mate?
Quite nicely. As I say, guys, it's lovely to be back. As I say, we're always keen to learn ourselves and hopefully share our learnings and our have guests on we've all got a journey and a story to tell, and obviously under this wonderful umbrella that is the sport of rugby, we've got things to share with one another. And again, that's the point of this pod, is really to share learnings. And James uses the term very often, we're very much an open book. We're very adaptable, and I say we'd love to hear from you guys, our audience. If you'd like to come on and share some of your views, your stories, please do get in touch.
Absolutely. And so thanks again to Jim for coming on. We hope to have you chatting again soon, and very much looking forward to picking this podcast series back up as we roll into the new year.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.